Okay, good morning and welcome to everyone to this session of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name's Lee Jameson, I'll be chairing the meeting today. First, before we do anything else, just go through the usual domestic arrangements. So if you're attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you'll be asked to leave. Please make sure your mobile phones and laptops are on silent. We're using the e-voting for the meeting this morning on the mod.gov app. Council members of the public and press may record, film or photograph the meeting. When the public and press is not lawfully excluded, if you're intending to do so, please inform the clerk. Don't think there's anyone here. If you hear the fire alarm, please leave by the closest fire exit and make your way to the assembly point at Ipswich Football Ground. Don't go down the atrium and don't use the stairs. Don't use the lifts, use the stairs. And do not enter the building until you're told it's safe to do so. Okay, we have several members and officers in attendance this morning, and if we can ask you each to introduce yourselves when we get to your particular area rather than do it all now. So now moving to the agenda, we've got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies this morning from Councillor Holt, and we have Councillor Clover substituting.
Okay. Any declarations of pecuniary interest by members? Take it none. Any petitions?
None received, Chair.
None received. Any questions by the public?
None received.
Any questions by councillors?
None received, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we move into the first item on the agenda, which is item BOS 25.4, which is the information on the locality and grant funding. I'd like to invite the members and officers here for that item to introduce themselves and then get into it, please.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Vicky Mosley and I'm the Head of Service for Communities. And the paper, like you say, is an information paper on locality grants. The committee requested information early this year as to kind of the structure of the grants, how they were being managed, the due diligence from officers, and the types and levels of spend across the districts. And so Laura, who's with me today, has authored the report and will happily either take you through some of that or answer any of the questions that you might have. Thank you.
Hi, Laura Butters, Community Grants and Development Manager. Sorry, apologies. So Laura Butters, Community Grants and Development Manager. As Vicky said, we've done an information bulletin about the locality awards, and rather than run through it line by line, I'll just capture the essence of the report. So Mid Suffolk and Babergh both have locality awards and have had those in place since 2020. Babergh members each have 2,000 allocation a year and Mid Suffolk 10,000 per year. Some of the information covered in here was gathered at the analysis of the grant funding when we carried out a review in March 2024, and that review ran between April and June and included some of the locality awards and came up with some recommendations that were implemented for this financial year. So we've included those in the report, but that did include giving us the ability to carry out some enhanced monitoring with the locality awards, and some of the guidance changed which supported members to be able to support organisations with their running and core costs, and also we updated the guidance so that it was clear which activity was excluded. as of end of January 2026, any unspent or unallocated locality awards will be redistributed to the remaining communities grants as well, which was something new that was introduced. The report also includes the locality awards process and due diligence, which the grant funding team carry out and the locality officers too. So included in that section is the due diligence document that we created earlier this year, which was shared with members to make it really clear whose responsibility was what, and I think was the reassurance for all of us that nothing was being dropped. The funds that are awarded are posted on the website as well, so that all community groups, members can see who's being supported. When an applicant is notified that they've been successful, we also share with them the expectations in terms of receipts and the monitoring that we receive back from them so that we can, again, complete the full due diligence. The other area of due diligence is reporting to our portfolio holders on a monthly basis the spend and the monitoring that we're carrying out and any risks that we've come across along the way. And to support the spend of the locality awards, we work closely with our comms team to share stories of where funding has been awarded and case studies. We have a dedicated grants funding landing page that gives the guidance and support, and we also produce an impact report so that it not only demonstrates the difference that the money is making, but also helps organisations identify the types of projects that can be funded. Alongside that, we have an internal funders group for the council. So as officers, we work together and can maximise the funding and secure any other opportunities. We've updated also our website with our position statement and how we're committed to supporting the voluntary sector. This year we've also had a lot of grant funding surgeries across both of the districts and are carrying out funding summits at the moment which share the funding available with organisations. And lastly, we've got the locality award monitoring and feedback. At the end of the year, we do expect organisations to just give us some feedback and some case studies so that we can share that again on the website for the following year. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Great. Members, any questions? Councillor Wyman.
Thanks, Laura. Great report. I'm always grateful to get the old locality funding awards. A couple of questions, really. I've just had to... I've just been dealing with Rachel over something for Capel just recently. And I actually probably, it's my fault really, I probably didn't understand that we could support things like events. When I say events, you know, going away and things like that. First question is, which is sort of related to that to some extent, which is how much feedback do we get from organisations, and do we sort of make the best use of that in terms of... I was talking to a lady this week, and it was for the Capel and Wenham Bowls Club or whatever, and they want to go to Hopton, and it's a really good story behind what they want to do. And, you know, I said to her, could we have some photos and bits and bobs? I suppose it's not an observation, but it's a question really. A, do we make the best use of the feedback we get, and how much do we get? And could we find ways to enhance that if we aren't perhaps getting it through members?
Thank you. We are really lucky that we do get some really good feedback, and it is an expectation when an award is made that we do follow up with the receipts and a case study. So I think consistently we do get feedback. Mostly we do get some photos as well. We send them a template of kind of what they could include to send to us. We can always do more, so we'll have a look at what we could do more. But the comms teams are really good, and Brad and his team often produce reels which are played through our social media, which show some of the projects that have been funded. But there's probably more that we could do, which I'll certainly have a look at.
Yeah, yes, I can follow up.
I sometimes think it would be better if because we're boots on the ground, so to speak, whether we could do things that could help improve that? I mean, if you asked me to do a reel, I would have no idea how to do a reel. But I've seen them, the ones that we do, which are really quite persuasive things, you know, and I think getting the message out to people in our communities that we are doing a good job for people, because obviously people tend to think about all the bad things we do, like all kinds of things I could mention, but we do a lot of good stuff as well, and I sometimes think that sometimes just escapes people's attention.
Okay, Catherine Grandin, Councillor Grandin, sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. I'm really pleased as a Hadley member to have this locality budget. What I haven't already used is already allocated to people. I just haven't got round to filling the forms. I would love it to be higher, but I know there are financial constraints on that. And so I wondered, because in our pre-meeting we were hearing that some councillors don't necessarily spend all theirs. So I wondered if something perhaps could be looked into where those councillors that could benefit in their ward of having more added to their budget could perhaps apply for more and you know, state why, and those that maybe don't need their full 2,000 say they're happy to put theirs back into the pot, so that there's not necessarily more coming from another area, because obviously I know our Babergh's not in that position, but where there's been some left over from last year, perhaps, instead of it going into a general pot, could maybe be allocated to those councillors who could maybe use it and benefit from it. And the other thing I would like to just say is how much in Hadley we appreciate having Imogen Tink, because she communicates with us so well, and she is so helpful to us at every point. She also comes to our community meetings, and after which we then say, oh, remind me how much I've got again and where I've already allocated it, and so on. And so it's brilliant having an individual contact. So that's working really well, having that point of contact who knows us so well, who knows our area so well. That really is working as a very good way of organising your team. And I have one final question, is in here you say about schools not being eligible, which I can understand, but you do say unless there's another a wider, I can't remember the wording now. Unless there is where there is no wider community benefit. So I wonder if you could give perhaps an example of what kind of thing could be applicable there, please, because we sometimes get applications from schools. So a few questions, I'm sorry.
I'll respond to the last question just around the types of projects that would be eligible in the school. So we have had some examples of some intergenerational projects, so maybe where a school are visiting a care home and they're doing some work together, where they've maybe pulled together a garden that the community also have access to. So it's around a project that the school children do with a part of the community that isn't just the parents, I think is.
Sorry, and then with regard to your first question around how we might reallocate unspent funds, where there is obviously where perhaps members have got additional projects that it might like to fund. I think that's probably something that we need to take away outside of this meeting and have a look at that, because what we tried to achieve with the sort of clawing back of any unallocated or unspent funds at the 10-month point was to put it into a central pot, which is what you've kind of alluded to, and actually where we could identify and recognise where there were greater needs, that actually we could then support funding projects in other areas. So to a degree that we could already enable some of that to happen, but I think in terms of making that more explicit, that's something we need to probably take away and have a conversation with Councillor Smith about.
Yes, I certainly didn't know that was how, I just thought it went back into a black hole, you know.
No, it's collected back into, so we have community development grants, which are our annual grants, and that Laura also manages. The funding or any unspent, unallocated funding will then go back into that said pot that would then be redistributed. So, because what we really want to make sure happens that every penny is spent and that communities are benefiting from every single penny that is allocated to grants. So that was the reason for doing it. This is the very first year we will do it, so we can have a look to see and reflect on how successful that has been at the end of the year. But certainly we can have other conversations with Councillor Smith.
If I may, Chair, may I say something else, please? Thank you. Going back to what Councillor John Wyman said earlier, I think it's a very good PR thing, really, for us as a council, because quite often people only think of Babergh as doing the bins and nothing much else, and forget about all the other things that we do. And I think this is a very good opportunity to show that we as a council are doing something good and helpful in the community. So I think maybe we need to do even more than we're doing now to demonstrate to the whole community that this is what individual councillors are doing and Babergh Council is doing. Thank you.
I completely agree with that, Councillor. I think we are doing far more than we ever have done, and the work that Laura and the comms team do to kind of elevate this work and end-of-year reports is significantly sort of improved over the last few years. But I think there's also a role that we could really take and use your support as well, because obviously we can work with parish councils and share information to the parish councils, which we often do. There's member bulletins that we have, but again, if we can arm you with all that information really regularly, then obviously if you could help us to share that information as well, we'd be really grateful.
We probably need reminding of this is the end of the task, to publicise it or to remind people to take photos or to help in the publicity. We probably need a bit of a reminder there.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Councillor Smith, Cabinet Member for Thriving Communities. I do agree. I think all the members are very well aware of the Locality Awards. Officers obviously are and work so hard on maintaining them. But and of course the organisations who receive the awards are aware. But I think there is a case that the communities more generally don't know about that work, and we should really make more of showing how much we do.
Thank you. Any Councillor Clover?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Grandin said regarding Officer Imogen Tink. She's a terrific officer, and her speed of response is fabulous, and also the clarity that she gives you, so you know exactly, in terms of the guidance, is first class. And in terms of comms, really, and getting the message out there, I think also that Councillor Wyman's point here is that we can also, mustn't forget parish magazines, which are very good at broadcasting this information. Thank you.
Yeah. And before, we're going to get into Imogen's fan club, but yeah, I'd like to also endorse Imogen's fantastic locality officer, and my experience with her is brilliant as well. So obviously we are big fans. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to sing Imogen's praises as another Hadley member. Bless her.
Other officers are available. I was going to ask about the Council Locality Award spend, which it says in the report is updated monthly. I looked at it recently because I couldn't remember how much I had left, and it obviously hasn't been updated. It seems not to have been updated for a while. It took me a while to find it as well. In fact, I think I found it on the report here. So is it updated monthly? Or
I'll go and check, but we do diarise it to be done at the beginning of each month. So yes, it certainly should be, but I will double check that, yes.
and I should actually keep a note of it myself, what I've spent. That would be easier, but thank you.
Any other questions from members? No? Okay. We'll go into debate. This is an information bulletin. I mean, if there are any recommendations you feel you want to put over, then please do. Does anyone want to start the debate? Councillor Grandin?
So I don't know whether it's needed because of the response that we've got, but to put in as an official recommendation about the money that's not used by some councillors being available for other councillors to add to their budget. Is that needed in view of the response that they'd like to look at it anyway?
Thank you, Councillor Grandin. It really depends. If the officers are happy to take that away as a comment and work on that, they can report back to us informally. It's more up to the committee as a whole as to whether you would see that actually in a written recommendation, or if you as a group are happy for that to just be a comment that's taken away from officers. So I would probably bat that back and take a steer from a group.
As Laura's just sort of explained in her presentation to yourselves, we did undertake quite a significant review of all grants that were supporting voluntary and community sector in the summer last year. We're now, and this year is the first year that we've implemented some new changes, and there has been some of those changes to locality awards, which is around the pooling of all the unspent funding, and then maybe working with members as to where we can allocate that. We're only now approaching the 10-month point, and so we're still to see whether that action and that recommendation that was adopted has actually going to be working. So my recommendation is that we are permitted to see the year out, reflect on how effective that change to the locality awards has been, and then to come back to you at some point to just demonstrate whether that's been a positive impact, or actually if it didn't do anything in terms of what we were aspiring to achieve, and then come back to you with the outcomes of that, as opposed to try to look to change anything at this point.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Grandin?
I'm not sure really, I don't think so. Sorry. I think I'd like it more formalised for them to look into this and report back to us. I don't know if I understood that correctly, that specific aspect will be looked at, or perhaps I didn't understand.
Apologies. I think what the grants review has aimed to achieve, I think, might address your concerns, but we haven't got to the point of actually enacting that yet, because we haven't got to the 10-month point, at which point we'll have a better understanding of what the unspent funds are, and potentially through conversations with the locality officers who are speaking with yourselves, where the demand is. So for us to redistribute, we haven't got to that point, we haven't got to the end of the year, so we haven't been able to do it and then evaluate its success or otherwise. I think at that point it might be that we will have addressed your concerns, because actually any unspent funds may have then been redistributed across the districts.
May I make a suggestion on that as well then, please?
Okay.
May I suggest that also when you talk to your locality officers, that you also, where you think it's appropriate, or to everyone, ping a message to councillors and say, because our locality officer may not know that we've been approached by someone or other, or some organisation, and we've had to say no because we've run out, but they may not know that. So it would be really helpful if you wouldn't mind contacting us as well, saying do any of you need another whatever? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wyman.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Grandin's point, I completely understand the concept of what we should try and aim to do. We do slightly feel the sort of less well-off organisation within our joint council. So we look sometimes sort of slightly at what's spent elsewhere. A couple of points really. One is, which was going to be a question in the first place, do you think we spend our money better than Mid-Suffolk District Council because we have less and we have to look at it harder? That's a little question. The second point really is that if there is a surplus, say, of whatever at the end of the year when it's all finished, why not have a visible pool, and then it's up to the Babergh District Council then to bid for that pool or part of that pool for a specific project. And I know this is a bit of extra work for you in a way, but you might be able to recognise really good and valid reasons why that might need to be supported, and it just doesn't mean that a council can just go along there and just help themselves to the money, so to speak. So once they've spent their proportion, if they want to bid for part of the residual monies, then it could be quite a good way of supporting other good causes really. Because I do think that the money we do spend is well spent and well targeted, because most councillors know where they, the causes they really want to support. They'll also know the people that have slightly deeper pockets within our communities that are just putting a hand out for some more money really. So I just think that's a more rounded approach.
To respond to the last point, then, yeah, I think so. Laura, myself, and Councillor Smith will be meeting after this meeting, and we can go through all the points that you've just suggested, so we can take that on board and come back. But also, in terms of your first point, in terms of whether or not you provide your funds more wisely or differently to Mid-Suffolk, we don't do that kind of analysis. I think when we look at what we do try to identify is the types of projects, whether it's towards kind of sport and recreation, whether it's to do with health and well-being, whether it's supporting young people, older people. We tend to categorise your spends in that regard, as opposed to one doing better than the other. But so there's no answer to the first question, but we do have a really good evaluation, and the end-of-year report does demonstrate how you've spent your money and how effectively and well that your funding has been spent.
I think just to add to that as well, the grants review that we did last year, this new action of at the end of January, any unspent or unallocated locality budget goes into the community grants, was to kind of encourage and support spend. So we may well be debating something that won't happen. I'm quite confident that actually all members will spend by that date. And I think locality officers across the districts do work with their members to make them aware of community activity if they're not already aware. So I hope this won't be a problem.
Councillor Wyman? Yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, anyone else got anything to say? If not, okay, we'll take that as an informal recommendation then, and as the bulletin is just for noting. Okay, well, I'd like to thank Vicky, Laura for coming this morning. And okay, we'll now move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the Household Recycling and Waste Collections Policy, which is paper BOS 25/5. I'd like to invite the members and officers to introduce both themselves and the item this morning. Councillor Saw.
Thank you, Councillor Jameson. Deborah Saw, Cabinet Member, People and Place, and I will be introducing the Household Waste and Recycling Waste Collection Policy. And I am supported by...
Ollie Fairs, Head of Waste and Recycling.
And Sharon Bayliss, Service Improvement Advisor for Operations.
Okay, so the purpose of this is to review the draft policy and to receive your comments and feedback, and to get your assessment of whether the policy is sufficiently robust and fit for purpose before progressing any further. The aims of the policy are to outline how the service will be delivered to residents in a fair and transparent manner. It sets out the responsibilities of householders to ensure maximum participation, and it establishes a framework for use by council officers and residents. This is, again, a domestic policy. It doesn't cover businesses. So what does the policy cover? It covers the service that we're going to offer to residents, standard and non-standard, the service for properties with communal bins, assisted collections, new build properties, and also how we are going to educate and enforce this policy. So the implementation of better recycling in June 2026 will affect every one of the 40,000 plus households in the district. Households will have a different system of recycling and collection, with more bins for different waste streams, a different frequency of collection, and rules regarding proper bin usage. We need to ensure that the council has a household recycling and waste collections policy that clearly outlines the standards and scope of the waste and recycling services that we intend to deliver to our residents. The policy must be clear and effective in meeting both resident and service needs and driving improvements in the council's recycling rates that are required by government. We would welcome your feedback on this policy before it goes to Cabinet on the 9th of December. I should make a plea. This is not an opportunity to revisit decisions that have already been made, but just to remind you, there was a Cabinet decision in May 2024 to institute a weekly food waste collection. In September 2024, we agreed a new system of new weekly curbside food waste collection, moving from a commingled single bin system to twin stream and 3 weekly residual waste collections. In February this year, the council approved the procurement of new vehicles for food waste collections. And in May, Cabinet discussed and approved a variation to the council's joint waste collections contract. So there have been a lot of decisions already made about this. This policy is basically how we're going to deliver the service. And I should also point out that almost 9 in 10 UK citizens say they regularly recycle at least most of the things that can be recycled. But there are still high rates of miscapture. Only 3 in 4 people report disposing of recyclable materials in general rubbish, but actually 81% of residents across the country are putting non-recyclable items in recycling bins. So less than 1 in 10% of UK citizens feel very confident about what can and cannot be recycled. So obviously, communication and education about this policy is absolutely key. And we have an extensive communications programme for our residents across the whole of Suffolk, which we'll be starting to introduce in January next year. So people are very enthusiastic about recycling, but recycling rates have plateaued, and in England the recycling rate is just over 42%. In Babergh we are around that mark with 39%, and we want to improve performance, and it's for this reason that the service principles and policies have been designed. It also should be borne in mind that local authorities will be expected to achieve higher recycling rates and will be subject to performance metrics, so that by 2030 a recycling rate of 60% should be achieved. Our policy aims to increase recycling rates, reduce contamination, and ensure compliance with national legislation and guidance. We also want to seek to provide transparency and accountability by clearly outlining the level of services residents can expect, but also their responsibilities in supporting effective waste management. Importantly, the policy recognises, as we always have, that there will be exceptions to the standard waste collection service. And we will, of course, be providing, we will be making provision to accommodate specific needs. The officers have spent the summer actually assessing all these properties, and that assessment is almost complete. And I can report that only 0.6% of our households will not be suitable for the standard service. But, as always, we will be seeking to help these households. We also have households who require assisted collections, where people have limited mobility or have a temporary health condition, and of course we will be still helping those households. So we do recognise that some houses or localities may have particular features where a standard delivery is not appropriate. For example, numbers of steps, no garden, no external access to wheeled bins and containers, and restricted access for our vehicles or crews. If it's determined that the standard waste collection service is not suitable for a standard household collection, alternative containers will be provided. We can also provide single-use sacks for refuge, and where collections for recycling cannot be achieved using the standard bins, we will make provision by supplying smaller bins, containers or bags for the relevant waste streams. This policy is designed to raise awareness and encourage residents to recycle correctly. It also aims to encourage residents to maximise the benefits of the recycling service and minimising the amount of non-recyclable waste produced. The County Council did a analysis of the waste that's contained in the black bins, and found that there was a large amount of material in the black bins that could actually be recycled. So the council will adopt what we call the 4 E's approach. So we'll be engaging with residents, we'll be explaining, and we'll be encouraging them to recycle. We are not the bin police. We do not wish to spend our time examining what's in people's bins. So we will, enforcement through a fixed penalty notice will be the last resort. We recognise that people can put items in the wrong container inadvertently. However, if residents continue to put the incorrect items in bins, their bins may not be collected, and they will be informed why by letter, and will actually have stickers put on their bins, and we will collect the bin the next week. But enforcement through fixed penalty notice will be a last resort. And talking about communications, residents will be kept informed about the upcoming changes to recycling through communications both from the Suffolk Waste Partnership and ourselves as the District Council, and you will have found details of the extensive campaign in Appendix D. Members will receive briefings on a regular basis, and you will have received a written briefing from Sharon quite recently, and there'll be an all-member briefing on Teams this Thursday. Members will also receive an information pack. So this policy basically lays out what residents can expect. We've always had a policy. You may not have known that, but we've always had a policy. Given the changes that will be made, we felt that it was important to outline this policy so that you, and residents knew what it is. And it does go into extensive detail. And I myself was somewhat surprised by things that shouldn't be put in the bin, and something that I'm extremely conscious of now. So that is the actual policy, and I would like to congratulate the officers on the huge amount of work that has been done so far, and an enormous amount of work as regards communication, which will be launched in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saul, for that detailed report. Before we go to questions, I just want to say to Laura, Vicky and Councillor Smith that although you're more than welcome to stay, if you have other things to be getting on with, don't feel you have to sit in here. You can go. Right, members, any questions? Councillor Grandin?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd like to endorse and say that the report's really excellent, and I would also like to say how wonderful our bin service has been in all the years I've been a councillor, and to thank Ollie for his fantastic response. Every time you communicate with him, you get an immediate response, and we have managed to keep our residents happy, because if there's a slight mistake, it's always been rectified right away. And having seen places like Bristol and so on, with their millions of bins out there and all sorts of mistakes going on, I think we've really benefited from a really great system here over the years. But, you know, obviously we've got a new system coming forward. My concern on this is one aspect of the publicity and stroke education. Unless I've misunderstood, one thing that I noticed in there, which seemed to be something that hooks around the bin, I think this is going to be something that affects all residents, and I think we're going to be inundated with queries or concerns, worries, probably needless worries. I think there will be needless worries from residents. But if it could be so easily remedied, if there was something that we could stick inside each bin, a laminated something that goes on the inside lid of the bin, each bin, and says, this is what can go in here. Do not put this in here. This is what should go in this colour bin. And that stays firmly inside the lid of the bin, and that every resident who has such bins gets this, then that would just stop the need for endless queries, what can go in, and am I doing this right, and worries about, am I putting the wrong thing in this bin, especially for the first few months of this. But I didn't see anything similar to that, apart from a mention of something that hooks around a bin, which would just be lost in the weather or stolen by someone or whatever. Could you tell me if something like this might be possible, or if I've misunderstood, please?
Yeah, thank you. So we have discussed this at length about providing stickers on bins, and the decision has been no, we would avoid that. It's very, very time consuming, costly to do. We will be providing all households with exactly that information, just not in a sticker format, so that they will get an information pack with all of that detail on. But yeah, we have made a decision that we didn't think it was the best use of resources to sticker a bin. Bins get wet, stickers don't last. Yeah, my experience is it's probably best not to.
Any other questions? Councillor Clover?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a very good document, so thank you for that. So by 2030, we're looking at a 60% recycling rate, and as you've already highlighted, it's the rates of miscapture that are the problem, and when it's often a conversation that happens in many homes: is what do you recycle in what bin? I think now that we're going over to what is effectively a 5-bin system, the rates of miscapture could go up rather than down, and so therefore it comes down to, well, in the first place, communication, as Councillor Grandin has already indicated. But then my concern, I accept the point about not wanting to become bin police, but without enforcement and some sort of message going out there, I think there could be a real problem that people get confused and aren't able to follow what we're seeking to achieve here.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication throughout this is key, and it's not just the pre-launch communication that is going to be really comprehensive. It is continuing that after and, all the way through the future. I mean, the existing system has been in place for 20 years and people are still getting it wrong. So it is absolutely critical that we keep up with that and resource that fully moving forward. It's not just we get to the 1st of June and we're done. It's ongoing.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other particular steps that you can recommend that would help improve the system?
I just, going back to communication, I just don't think you can ever do enough, and having officers on the ground where people are struggling, where people are confused, is getting out there and talking to people. I think that is ultimately, it's all we can do. Get that comms messaging right is the key.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Yeah. So in terms of enforcement then, because at the moment it's sort of, it's the last resort, but I think that my own view is that with a little bit of enforcement, the message will soon get out there. So I think that does have to be part of the strategy and the plan. Because I don't know what the present enforcement rate is. I don't know if you know what the present enforcement rate is, but I suspect it's not very high.
No, so our existing policies don't really give us the teeth to do that. It's not very clear. So this was a great opportunity with that new policy, just to get that in black and white, to give us all that framework with which to work under. So at the moment, yeah, we do very little in that space. Officers will engage with people and do their best, but without that actual potential sanction, that's the missing piece of the jigsaw for me.
Obviously, we will enforce for serial offenders who are doing this willfully, doing it as antisocial behaviour. We will enforce in those cases. I think the policy does lay out a series of actions that we will take before we enforce, but our intention is to enforce. But I think you can see from the policy that we are more focused initially on education and engagement with our residents. We recognise that this is quite a big change, and we also have, I think our crews are excellent. If you look at our missed bin collections, we have very low levels of missed bins. They tend to know the residents. They know, their issues. They're always very helpful. So we are helped by the fact that we have someone, or people on the ground who can interact with our residents and explain things to them. And we recognise that this is a big change. So we've focused on, with the Waste Partnership, a whole variety of different communications methods to get to our residents. And as you can see from Appendix D, from sort of supermarkets, panels, to our vehicles, to bus shelters. In fact, I should think they'll probably be sick to death of hearing about recycling. But we think it's that important.
Okay, Councillor Grandin, then Councillor Wyman.
Thank you. I might have missed it in the report, but for residents who need bag collections, like people who live in terrace houses and so on, will they be getting different coloured bags, or how will that work, please? And then I have another supplement.
So at the moment, with the commingled service, you have a clear sack for recycling. The clear sack that will be used for the container element of plastics, glass, metals will go in a clear sack. So we're going to introduce an additional single-use sack that's made of recyclable paper. So the paper and card element will go in that.
Thank you. Could I ask another question, please?
Okay, yeah.
So it's going to be three weekly recycling. We have 2 at the moment. So will it be, as at the moment, we have the blue bin collected on the Monday, and then the following Monday will be the black bin? Will it be similar? And will people's days be changing?
No, so that 3-week cycle will be on the same day of the week. So just week 1, week 2, week 3, all on the same day. We're not looking at any day changes at all. We felt that was really crucial for the smooth implementation of the service.
Good.
So your food waste collection day will be bin day, albeit garden waste collections are totally separate from this, and we haven't included them as part of
Oh, great, yeah. So otherwise it might have been too many things for people to deal with. Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Wyman.
Thanks, Chair. Ollie, could you just give me a bit of clarity on the glass position in terms of bottles, bins, community bottle banks? I recollect asking Director Ems about a year or so ago about how this money was being recycled. I'm just trying to contextualise, say for example, for Hintlesham and Chaddersham, they have about 2,000 quid's worth of revenue per annum from glass recycling, and clearly people will probably choose to put their numerous wine bottles, etc., into the bins rather than going to the community hall and put them in the bottle bank. So, sort of, where's this money sort of going, really? I mean, is it something that, I mean, I think Mark sort of explained to me that it was money that we were already paying to bottle bank providers for the collection service. So, I mean, is that accurate, or I don't say accurate, but is that still the case, or how can we potentially make good some of the financial losses? Just to contextualise that, £2,000 at Hintlesham Chaddersham Parish Council is about 25% of their precept.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the monies we pass on to community groups, that is funded at the moment through recycling credits that are paid to us by Suffolk County Council. Suffolk County Council have agreed to honour those recycling credit payments, albeit that the bottle banks will go because of curbside collections, up until the 31st of March 2028. So based on the previous levels of income, that grant funding will be maintained. So that safety net is there.
Can I follow up on that, please? Just a quick follow-up. So, presumably, does that mean that the glass recycling market, let's call it, is entirely dominated by Suffolk County Council? Are there no sort of, I don't understand the market really anyway, but I mean, are there no private contractors that would potentially collect glass commercially and or recycle it and or still pay communities?
So the way the system works is, yes, there are people out there that will collect glass commercially as a single stream. So that is the bottle bank system we have now. Better Recycling, the new service, really does make that redundant in terms of the householder, because you know, we've now got that statutory duty to collect it from the curbside. So that has changed the dynamic of the industry. So all that glass now will go in mixed recycling containers and be processed at MRFs rather than these glass processors businesses. So yeah, it has fundamentally changed the industry in that respect.
Okay. Excuse me. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the clinical waste. I used to be a nurse and I used to be a carer for Suffolk County Council and used to go to people's homes, and they often had black bins full of incontinence pads because they couldn't always put the bins out and we didn't know when the day was. Am I right in thinking that the incontinence pads aren't classed as clinical waste and that they're going to be double bagged and put in the black bin and emptied every 3 weeks? Is that correct?
Yeah, so that is exactly what we do now. We give households extra refuse capacity should they have that kind of waste. And yeah, so it will move from a 2-weekly collection to a 3-weekly collection.
So if, yeah, I'm just thinking that would be a bit smelly in summer. If they had, supposing they had some kind of illness and they had incontinence pads and it was infectious, like they had C. diff or something, what could they then get a yellow bin? If
Yes, absolutely, and we offer that service now to residents as a totally separate clinical waste collection, and we do that weekly.
Yeah.
the other one, this is probably really obvious, but when the food collection is every week, does that mean there's 2 bin lorries coming down our street on a Monday, see? So one for food, one for like.
Yes, so the food waste collection vehicle is a much smaller vehicle than a conventional bin lorry. It's a 7.5 tonne vehicle.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's all.
Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Moving on to pages 4 and 5 here. I mean, obviously we've got more increased collections, and therefore the mileages and the maintenance costs are all going to rise. What are has anyone looked at the CO2 implications of this? And one other point, while just to pull the questions in together, the bin for the caddy liners for the food waste. Do you know what the cost of that first 6-month supply will be?
So in terms of the CO2, all of that analysis was in those previous cabinet papers. So if I could refer you back to those, because I don't have that information at hand. It is quite detailed. And then, oh well, Councillor Saw was, one step ahead of me.
We predict the annual reduction of CO2 will be 13,000 tonnes.
Thank you.
This is because although we'll be doing weekly collections, our other collections will be less. So there is a net gain.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the CO2 saving in this is collecting the food waste separately, sending that to anaerobic digestion, as opposed to putting it through an energy from waste plant. That's where your CO2 saving is.
Thank you. Can I go again, Chair?
Yeah.
So, sorry. Yeah, in terms of the communal bins and the collection of those, so you're dealing with a number of agencies, managing agent, housing association, landlord, residents. How will you be able to identify who to speak to and advise them of their responsibilities?
So as we do now, really, we are in contact with these people anyway, so we have quite a good understanding of who the management agents are, but as part of this whole process, officers are revisiting every single bin store and carrying out an audit. So I think where we do have gaps in our data and information, that's all dropping out of the piece of work we're doing at the moment.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to ask a question. On page 63, 17.2, it says that the responsibility for supplying new bins is down to on new developments is down to the developer. But if they don't do that, it should be met by the householder. Yeah, now unless tell me if I've got this wrong, but on 4.4 of the technical guidance, it says the developer must supply external bins. So are they talking about different things? Or is there
No, thank you for the question. So our default position is we do expect the developer to pay for the bins, and we look to the developer to provide that.
Because that bit on 17.2 sort of suggests that they should do it, but if they don't, then it's down to the homeowner anyway.
Yes, ultimately somebody pays for those bins, but in the main it would be the developer.
Yeah, so on that 4.4 in big red letters it says the developer must supply them. So if they don't, we're not going to do anything. Are we going to do anything about it, or?
Yeah, perhaps that is something. Yeah, just that wording we just need to revisit. I mean, yeah, in terms of what sanctions we've actually got, I'm not really that clear. I mean, it works in as much as that developers do tend to, generally do pay for bins on their development.
Yeah,
it's that understanding.
In the report, it seemed like to contradict itself,
yes,
and I wasn't sure.
Yeah, okay. Point taken. Thank you.
Councillor Saw?
We recognise that in many of our planning applications, one of our conditions is that developers provide bin storage. I'm slightly wondering, I don't know, whether we can actually make the supply of the bins a planning condition. It's something that we should actually look into, I think.
Councillor Grandin?
I just wondered when people can expect the new bins to be delivered, and how do they, if they want a different size bins, I saw reference to different size bins, if a resident does want a different size bin, because they may only have a small garden, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, no, thank you. So the rollout is going to start in February, leading up to the start of the new service in June. And part of our comms as well will be to set up a channel whereby through our website, residents, as soon as they start to receive that information, they can make contact with us and we will look at individual circumstances. And that is starting to happen now organically anyway. I don't suppose a week goes by where a member's referring somebody to me who's had concerns about whether they can cope. So it is happening anyway, but that will be part of our sort of more widespread comms campaign.
Sorry, can I just add as well? So the default position for new bins for residents will be that standard collection service. So a 240 litre bin for all waste streams. But, as Ollie said, if they, for accessibility issues or, collection crew issues, then we would look to provide them with a smaller bin or a paper sack or a waste container. But it's not a pick and mix choice, I think, in the nicest possible way. Yeah, thank you.
So if they have a small garden, that's not a good enough reason sort of thing?
No, I mean, as Deborah, Councillor Saul mentioned in her introduction, we want to encourage residents to recycle as much as possible. So if they have the facility to have a bin, but it may not be the larger one, we'll look to a smaller, the smaller size down. If that's not possible, then sacks. But yeah.
Councillor Clover?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the 4 E's, and obviously this is a work in progress, would it be possible to have monthly briefing updates on the progress of prior to the launch, so we can understand how things are progressing?
So currently, I produce, I think it's about every sort of 4 to 6 weeks, an update on the project itself, and that covers updates on communications, where we are with regards to our contractor position. Did I say comms? Can't remember. But yeah, that's at the moment is shared with cabinet members and portfolio holders. So I'm not sure if that's provided to you separately, or because it doesn't go to all members at the moment. But we can certainly arrange for that to happen.
Yeah, I think we can do that as we get closer. I think it's very important that members do actually have that briefing, because they will be asked questions by their residents.
Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask something about nappies, and I've already asked about incontinence pads. Most parents, I assume, use disposable nappies. Will we be providing any information about alternatives to that during the education and campaign?
I want to say yes, we will. I haven't, if I'm honest, I'm part of the comms group at the moment that's looking into the information packs we're going to be sending out. So yeah, I will absolutely take that on board and make sure we do direct people. It always does come up in conversation. It's just our, I guess it's just for us as officers, it's just that balance of the information we want to send out and getting those key messages out there and not overloading residents with information as well. But yeah, no, totally take your point. It is important.
I think actually the Suffolk Waste Partnership did do a campaign with the organisation that promotes alternatives to disposable nappies, I think a couple of years ago. So we should still have some messaging and some that we can put into it. I'm not absolutely certain how successful it was, though.
Councillor Grandin.
Thank you, Chair. Just really following on Councillor Clover's question about communications and keeping us informed. Yes, I completely agree with that, because I think if bins start just turning up to people from February onwards, it would help if we as community leaders can be aware that this is about to happen in our area. So, Hadley, your bins are going to be collected, delivered between this date and this date. Let people know, so that people don't suddenly, because not everyone's going to be aware of, even if there is information, not everyone keeps in tune with things. So if we can be part of that communication pattern, that would be helpful. But, so if we're told this is going to happen at this stage, that would be in our particular area, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. But just to reassure you, we are writing to every household prior to the delivery of bins, warming them up to the fact that they're coming, and then there'll be a second mail out with actually the details of the service. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All councillors will be receiving a briefing pack early in the new year as well, so that'll help with a whole raft of FAQs. We can include the delivery schedule and everything in there as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Sounds like you've thought of everything.
I'd just like to, the fact that we want to encourage people to recycle is brilliant. It's fantastic to get more recycling. But ideally, we'd want people to reduce or reuse stuff. In the comms, are we, encouraging people to reduce and reuse as well as recycle?
thank you. Sort of follow-on answer really is we've discussed it as the level of what we want to include in the direct comms to residents, and it is finding that balance when we're trying to restrict it to 6 pages, I think, of information we want to give residents about the new service and what else we would want to include. So that's part of our thinking, it's part of the conversation. So yes, absolutely, but to what extent we'll be able to cover everything that in an ideal world we'd want people to do is tricky.
Obviously, we will be focusing on home composting as the Waste Partnership has done in the past, particularly as it relates to food and even garden waste. Should point out that the scheme that we just launched a couple of months ago with on small electrical items in our car parks has actually been very successful, I'm glad to say. So, you know, hopefully we can continue that. And obviously we would like people to reduce and reuse things. And in a way, that's why, from the community's viewpoint, we've been, you know, helping out the men's sheds and so that they can do their magic on things that don't work, that possibly could work again.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Wyman.
Just on that point, Councillor, so is the destination for the wide electrical appliances then to go back to be remanufactured, or what's the process? I've just got this visions of all this stuff being ploughed into Hadley men's sheds, and these guys are all trying to fix things up. I mean, I'm not sure that's entirely the right thing to do, really, but that's no question.
You're not far off, actually. So where this waste ends up to is a big warehouse where all different things happen to it. If they can be reused, they will be, and there will be a guy there checking that. They'll be stripped down into their component parts, and any of that can be reused will, and then ultimately what's left gets recycled. It just really depends on the piece of equipment and the condition it's in ultimately, but you know, there will be a process where all of those things are explored.
I think that's really good to know, Ollie, really, because I think people are quite cynical. They think, oh, well, you know, they're going to go to India and be smashed into bits or whatever and thrown into the sea and things like that. So I think, you know, getting that message across to people that have got, like, as I have, like 2 old Dyson vacuum cleaners in my shed, which I need to do something with because they don't work, it gives you a bit more confidence that if you do that, you know, they are actually potentially fixed, or, you know, they go to an ethical sort of destination.
I think our intention is, once the service has been going for a few more months, is to actually do a press release about, you know, how much has been recycled, where it's gone, has some of it gone to charities, how has it been reused, because I think actually it's something that people are really interested in. So I just think we need to wait another month or so, because then it'll have been going, I think, about 3 months. So we'll have a better idea of where stuff has gone.
That's great. Just sorry, Deborah, just one final thing. Didn't East Suffolk do a bin pickup arrangement where that people could put things on top of a bin? They had like a pilot scheme where people could leave some on top of a bin, and then they would be, you know, put somewhere rather than going to car parks.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. They've started that recently, so I think they will drop out of that some data and information that, yeah, we can analyse and use, and yeah, look to see how it works, and perhaps something for the future.
Okay, any further questions? If not, we will open the item for debate. Members are, you know, can add additional recommendations if they feel the need. Councillor Wyman, do you want to open?
I haven't got any recommendations, Chairman, but what I can say is I think it's a really complex subject, and I think everybody's done a great job, including you Councillor Seward, etc., because it will be quite impactful for people when they see these bins landing. they'll be thinking, blimey, where did that come from, you know? And I can almost see the bin wars going off in Hadley because people, you know, there's some houses that are quite congested, and I think I did actually read, there's a piece in the government guidelines over fixed penalty fines and the way you can adapt these things. But I mean, I noticed one of the points in there was things like obstruction and various other things. So I think the subject matter will develop. I think it will be an organic problem. I say problem. Yeah, it will be an organic problem for us as we move into next year. And I think we need to be well prepared for what may be down the road, so to speak, and think about what the impact is of the extra bins, people's attitudes. But it's a big issue, and I think, you know, we'll soon find out what the impact is liable to be. But all in all, a good job. Well done. Thank you.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we can all, as councillors, help with this by putting stuff in newsletters. We can, as Hadley people, can talk about it at the Hadley Community Forum and in the Hadley Community News. I was wondering when, if a household isn't, you know, getting it wrong and they get an informal warning, would it be worth putting the contact details of the councillor, the ward councillors, on any letter so they can contact us if they need some support? I don't know if everyone else might not like that, but I was thinking it might be, for example, it might be an elderly person getting confused about what to put in what bin. It might be as simple as the fact that they can't move the bin and they haven't contacted the council to let us know. I just wondered whether that might be an idea.
I mean, thank you. I would like to think that as officers, we would go through, before it ever came to that, we would have gone through that process and actually visited the site and spoken to the resident. I guess there's a point where perhaps notifying the ward councillor, depending on how far it all gets, but I would, you know, that working with the resident that's sort of that officer space really, and you know, and I'd be confident that we could deal with, you know, 99% of them without intervention really.
Okay, excuse me, just a reminder, in debate now, so Councillor Grandin.
Yes, thank you. I think they're doing a fantastic job, and everything sounds very well planned. I am a bit concerned, though, about the fact that it's going to be mostly leafleting and that kind of thing to educate people as to what goes in which bin. Because if you're an older person or a busy mother with a number of children and a job, it's not high on your list of priorities. So, you know, memorising what you know goes in which bin, which is outside, but your leaflet's inside, and so on. We're asking people to assimilate a lot of information by a particular date, whereas unfortunately, you know, a system of having something on inside a bin isn't going to happen. But that would have been an answer, because as you put something in the bin, you check it, think, oh no, that can't go in there, I'll have to put it in that one. Even, you know, someone busy, that's an easy way of dealing with it, but you know, obviously that's not going to happen. So you know, it'll be interesting to see how many people put things in the wrong bin and how long it takes to even out, you know, because it sounds like people are still putting things in the wrong bin now with only 2 bins to worry about. So hopefully, you know, it will work, and I think they're doing a great job within what they're able to do. But I think it's not going to be easy to remember what goes into which bin, because it is quite complicated, really, especially if it's not your day job.
So, are you saying you want to formulate some kind of recommendation out? we have to ask the officers.
The communications package is Suffolk-wide. You'll see in Appendix D that Mid-Suffolk has put in, because it feels it has particular issues, has put in some extra funding. I think, firstly, we will report after the service has been running for, say, 3 months on what's actually happened and what indicators we see. As Ollie has said, we will know. We have a great intelligence system, which are the guys who actually are working on the service with residents. So we should be able to pick up any particular problems quite easily. I think the other thing is, from I think all our experience, children are actually the most avid recyclers going, and seem to have an encyclopedic knowledge of what goes in what bin. And we have spent quite a few years with our education officer going into schools, and that will continue. I think that it is it is a very extensive communications campaign, and we've used every single vehicle that we can, including our own vehicles. So I would be very surprised, because one of the things that we will be testing is how many times people have seen the message, and what's been most effective. So I do think that the comms programme is as good as it could be. Yes, we could do more things and we could spend more money, but I think all of us are quite reluctant to spend council taxpayers' money, more money. But we shall see where we get to. I'm pretty confident, and I know that you mess with people's bins at your peril. So I am extremely sensitive to ensuring that residents feel confident and feel that they can do the right thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Councillor, so when you say you'll be reporting back to after a few months after it started, will that be to Cabinet, Council, to ONS?
I've just done something.
I was going to say, obviously the priority in those first few months is going to be making sure that the service is delivered. So, yeah, I think probably we'll take a steer from Director Ems when he's back in the office and let you know. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Grandin.
Thank you. If a resident puts something in the wrong bin, what happens to that item? Does it go in anyway, or does the bin operator put it at the side of the road, or what will happen, please?
So it really depends on how bad the contamination is. The materials reclamation facilities, the MRFs, they are there to sort waste. So they will pull out contaminants through that. All a bin collector can see is just that top of the bin, hasn't really got any idea what is underneath that. So that is what the processing facility does, do that and pulls those contaminants out. Obviously, we don't want any of that to happen at all, because we want the right stuff going in the right bin. But if a bin is so obviously contaminated, nappies is the classic, then the guys would just leave it, stick in the bin, and it'd end up being part of the next refuse collection.
Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just, presumably there are models elsewhere in the country where this is already in fact, so you've been able to draw a certain amount of learning from that. The one obvious thing is that when you increase the number of bins, not all people will have the space for storage of those bins. And I think that in actual fact, Councillor Saw has already commented on this, and it's good to hear, because I think the more we can encourage those that have got space for a compost bin to use the food, it's a double whammy. Their garden wins out of it, and it's less food waste to pick up. So I think that's a very good thing to encourage in the comms. But are you able to tell us any more about the other models that you've used in terms of adopting this model?
Only generally, in as much as that over time since we were establishing the design of the new service, we spoke to other local authorities that have gone for this exact system. And I think there's another 80 that are in the process of either recently transitioning or moving over to it to fit in the new requirements. A near neighbour, East Herts, has, in August, they swapped over to this system. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to catching up with their head of service there and just to see how that's going and any lessons learnt there as well.
I would remind members that we're in debate now rather than questions. But Councillor Carruthers.
This is a sort of it is debate, but it's also a sort of question. But it's a debate, I don't know. I was just wondering whether if the developers have to provide bins for waste, could they also provide compost bins for gardens? Is that something we could consider, or is that a completely separate subject altogether?
My experience with developers is it's quite difficult to get them to do anything extraneous, as our experience with certain developers and Swift bricks would lead us to expect. Obviously, there are. I know that Suffolk Waste Partnership does actually subsidise composting equipment, and so I think, as Councillor Clover said, one of our messages might be, open brackets, and we can give you, and we subsidise this equipment, and you can buy it from us.
Just picking up the point mentioned earlier about this coming back for review, would members want to see this come back to ONS for review once after a set period? Yeah, so we've had that as a recommendation. Any other debate from members? If not, what recommendations have we got now? Go on, Councillor Warren.
Just one point, talking to your point, Councillor Saw, over and the point over composting. I've noticed that some of the developments, and I've seen two now in East Suffolk District Council area, where the developer, and it's Persimmon in this case, they're actually setting aside, say, half an acre or so for allotments on their larger developments, which actually gives people a bit of an incentive to have, that composting kind of approach to growing their own food, but also that little kick you need just to say, well, you can do a composting, they can work, they can be safe, and things like that. So I think there's a position we can adopt potentially with our own planning sort of policy where we do try and promote things such as that rather than playgrounds, which are quite good, but we have plenty of them.
Okay, well, if everyone's happy, I'll ask Alicia for the recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. So, as a confirmed recommendation that we just discussed, I have that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee receives an update report on the implementation and impact of a simpler recycling policies. I also had two other recommendations noted down, but appreciate that they haven't come out of debate, so I'm open to feedback on whether we want this written down. I have another recommendation that simply just says that the Cabinet member of People in Place ensures that further communication is provided to all Babergh members on the upcoming changes to waste collection. I also have a recommendation about potential enforcement measures for property developers regarding the costs of supplying wheeled bins, which is what you raised in questions, but open as to whether we take them as part of the vote.
Members? Yeah? Councillor Granger?
So, looking into asking planners about part of the conditions of an application being that they're responsible for the bins and payment and so on. Did I hear that?
That was sort of alluded to anyway, wasn't it?
I think I did say that I would talk to planning about putting a planning condition in that bins would have to be supplied, because there are planning conditions now for actually supplying bin storage. I will talk to planning to see if that is possible.
Okay, so that is a recommendation.
So that could be covered by that recommendation that I just read out, which would that Councillor Saw go away and explore how best to enforce that, probably in collaboration with planning and the cabinet member for planning, as she says.
Okay, brilliant. Happy with that? Okay, can we have a proposer? Councillor Clover, and the seconder, Councillor Wyman. And if we could vote on e-voting.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now open for you in ModGov. Councillor Osborne, would you like me to take your vote verbally, or that's fine? I'll wait. Thank you, Chair. That makes 6 votes for the recommendation, so those are carried.
Thank you. Thanks to Councillor Saw, Ollie and Sharon for coming across this morning,
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now take a 10-minute break before we get into the next item. Okay, welcome back. We'll now move on to item 8, which is the Greenhouse Gas Report and Carbon Reduction Management Plan Annual Update, which is BOS 25/6. And I'd like to hand over to the portfolio holder and members, officers, if they could introduce themselves, please, and give the report this morning.
Climate change, nature recovery and biodiversity.
Jonathan Ward, Head of Climate and Nature Recovery.
Climate Change Manager. Emily Atack, Director for Property Development and Regeneration.
And we are also expecting Tom Barker to come in via Teams at some point. Okay, so if you could give the report this morning.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do a short introduction and then Jonathan can answer any questions I can't answer. So, officers have presented a report to the ONS Committee with details of the draft greenhouse gas report for the Council for the financial year 24-25, along with some additional information relating to previous recommendations, requests, and a summary of progress contained in the Carbon Reduction Management Plan. The Council is required to publish data on its emissions every year. Each activity by the Council is assessed for its direct and indirect energy use, e.g. gas use in buildings, direct fuel use in Council-owned vehicles. We provide updates on the Carbon Reduction Management Plan, which defines how we are going about reducing our emissions in order to progress towards the target of being carbon neutral by 2030. The GHG report describes how emissions are calculated along with details of the Council's target for 2030, which covers the Council's operations. The report provides further information on the methodology and meaning of scopes, i.e. the way we classify the sources of emissions. So Scope 1 includes direct emissions from owned or controlled sources. Scope 2 covers indirect emissions from the generation of purchased energy. And Scope 3 encompasses all other indirect emissions. Our greenhouse gas emissions report is focused primarily on our energy-related emissions, although it does include other activities such as use of water and creation of waste. It also provides a commentary on the reasons for any changes to emissions, any new sources of data, and why there may be an increase or decrease in emissions for particular activities, which we can go through in more detail after the introduction. Alongside the GHG report, there is a short briefing in Appendix B on the consideration of social value in supporting the prioritisation of decarbonisation activities as requested by ONS earlier. It reviews some of the approaches taken and considers how to deploy them. Officers are exploring how to incorporate wider environmental impacts, both positive and negative, in project and decision-making life cycles across the Council as a whole. And it's proposed that this assessment forms part of this work package for a consistent approach. Appendix C is an updated bulletin for the 2 leisure centres in Babergh that came to committee previously. The updates are relatively minor, largely focusing on updating emissions, energy and solar performance data. Now I have a summary of the GHG report, but I'm also assuming you've read it, but would you like me just to summarise it? Okay, so the headlines. Despite a colder winter than in the previous year, the estimated total emissions for Babergh are now 1,687 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's over 40% lower than the figures for our baseline year, which was 2018 and 19. So we're way away from that now. And nearly 15% lower than 23-24. 40% of the emissions come from leisure centres and almost 30% from sheltered housing, with the rest of our council estate the next biggest share at 12%, so for example in Endeavour House. However, Caution must be exercised in using inter-year comparisons and understanding progress, as there can be several reasons why emissions may go up or down, including warmer or colder winters and the length of the heating seasons, changes in the use of buildings and additions and removals of assets, which is Emily's domain, improvements in fabric of buildings or in equipment, so retrofitting some of our sheltered housing, changes in services we provide, changes to the numbers and types of vehicles and the lengths of routes that we have, changes in carbon impact of utilities, for example, electricity being less carbon intensive due to improvements in the national grid and the way we source our electricity, so using a green tariff rather than electricity obtained from an oil-fired power station. A few key things to note for the report. Sorry, I have to scroll down a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Last winter was colder than the preceding year, so we would have expected an increase in heating use in the region of about 7.5%, which I think was about it. Our share of Endeavour House's emissions has been reduced, which better reflects our share of the floor space, which I just referred to. And that will reflect an artificially high saving for 1 year, so next year it will be the more consistent saving. But the data tells us there's progress in the buildings for use of electricity and gas. The closure of the swimming pool at Kingfisher for several months, that impacted our energy consumption because obviously it wasn't being used and heated. Leisure centre emissions have actually switched from Scope 1 to Scope 3 as we're not the operator paying for the energy now. So, basically it's indirect. There's some changes in the way we calculate things, the amount of data that we get and the coverage of that data. So that all creates a blip in the numbers. We've captured electricity and gas emissions relating to property that's directly billed to us and not captured within our energy contract. So we've got a larger increase, one-off increase in those particular areas, and that comes under other council estate. If anyone remembers the numbers, it was something like 1,400 and something or other, so big. Use of petrol and diesel continues to fall as more vehicles get transitioned off petrol and diesel and onto HVO. So that means you'll correspondingly see a slight increase in emissions from HVO, but it still represents a net saving because there's less emissions from HVO than there are from petrol and diesel. Officers are currently looking into some of the previous year's water emissions, which is why there isn't a percentage change for Endeavour House. I don't know whether anyone picked it up, but the government has conversion factors that convert sort of usage into carbon dioxide units. And those conversion factors change every year, so there's always a little bit of a blip or change in those. So you can't compare it directly, but it's more relative, although it's still small. Officers have included some details on the carbon abatement offered by our solar PV installations, particularly at the two leisure centres. And this actually saved upwards of 66 tonnes of carbon by offsetting the amount of electricity we needed to use from the grid. We expect to report higher numbers in future as we get data from more systems and because we had some interruptions to generation at one site. Okay, so officers in preparation for creating the final greenhouse gas reports and updating the carbon reduction management plan are collecting more information on the good impact of council actions, and we want to include more for the next report. We've also recruited an energy and carbon officer in the climate and nature recovery team, and with the development of a new data platform, we are developing the ability to better interrogate our energy consumption and generation. So that should give us greater insight into how we can save more energy. And we're continuing to promote energy efficiency across all our facilities and encourage the uptake of training for our staff and partner organisation staff wherever possible. I don't know if people are aware that there are climate champions within Babergh that look at their areas and see what they can do to contribute. And one of the other things that we are working through is adding climate change objectives into people's development plans. And that started by giving an objective to the people at the top, and we have an expectation that will filter down. So we hope for some impact there. Looking forward for decarbonisation work funding, that's more of a problem. The main source of funding, the public sector decarbonisation scheme, was closed to new applications recently, which is a disappointment. But we have secured some funding through the National Heat Network Efficiency Scheme, which explores the feasibility of heat networks in 2 of the district's sheltered housing schemes. And as we all know, people in sheltered housing tend to be greater users of heating. We're continuing to look at all available funding and finance routes, so going out with our begging bowl, while we're also trying to get greater support from the government-funded Greater South East Net Zero Hub. You know, as a general note, while immediate action is crucial in achieving net zero by 2030, you need to recognise that some things, interventions are going to be related to the longer-term decisions on the lifespan of some of our assets. So you might not want to install something in one building because it's going to die soon, for lack of a better term, or the energy saving scheme that you're looking at might be good but quite expensive, and you might want something else because the lifetime of the asset is quite large. So, overall, it's quite a complex area with a lot of moving parts, and some parts are out of our direct control, which we said earlier. For example, we don't have much control over what Emily's up to with buying and selling of assets and what kind of asset it might be. And funding is really critical. No funding makes the challenge of achieving our target that much harder. At the moment, we're working towards finalising the greenhouse gas report and updating the carbon reduction management plan, which will provide greater detail on the status of the actions we're proposing and their impacts, along with priorities. And we're hoping to be presenting those to full council in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. Any questions from members? Councillor Grandin.
Very good report. I'm very interested in what you're saying, and congratulations to the team on reducing our energy use, which is always a good thing. I do have some concerns. I wonder if we should still be, as a council, and this is a bit controversial, I know, but trying to achieve net zero in 2030 when we don't have to, and when our economic position is not the greatest. I would like what we do on this front to be cost neutral. So, getting funds from elsewhere to do it, or it funds itself. And I know that's not always possible, but that would be, because I think we've got so many areas that we need to spend our funds on at the moment. So I wondered if you could give me both your views and also what the feasibility of that is, please.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one that we've all been thinking about. We are budget constrained. If we had enough money, we could complete the retrofitting of all the sheltered housings quite quickly, but we can't do that. We have to go out and look for funding each time, and sometimes it's match funding, so there is a cost to us as well. But we need a target there because it focuses minds, essentially. We've done our quick wins, and we're now on the more complicated stuff that requires money and time. So, you know, what we have tried to do, easy wins, what gives us the biggest bang for the buck, and then look at what else we can do. But, you know, I have said before to Cabinet, you know, if we don't get the funding, it's very, very difficult to achieve, but we will do our best. But I think West Suffolk have said they can't achieve 2030. And I wonder if it's because of similar considerations to us, you know, budgetary issues. I would be interested actually in asking them if they're not going for 2030 now, what are they doing with the money that was assigned to it? That would be an interesting question to ask. But, you know, we're doing what we can. I'm sure Jonathan can think about how to make things cost neutral. But, you know, if we don't have a target, it does mean we lose momentum. And I think sometimes with pressure comes better ideas and more creative solutions to move us towards that target. So I think it's a little difficult to say, you know, let's stop doing it and spend the money elsewhere. Personally, I would prefer to keep working on it as best we can while recognising there are things out of our control, but we will continue to move towards this really critical target for our planet. Jonathan might have something to add.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks for the question. So we're certainly looking at the first step. Everything we do is to better understand how we get more out of what we've got. And there's still more work we can do on that. So when we get better data, and now we have a new officer in place, we're doing that analysis of buildings. So where can we fine-tune them? Are we paying the right amounts of money? So what we're doing, both for net zero and in general then, is just trying to be more efficient. And so when we reduce the energy demand, we're reducing costs. So that is always going to be of benefit. In terms of financing bigger changes, I think what we're trying to get towards, again, with a better understanding of where we are and how it fits in with broader asset plans, is being ready for when there's funding that does come along. What is the next best option? And looking at schemes where, for example, either things like SALIX, which is particular energy efficiency loans, or councils have used National Wealth Foundation, Public Works Loan Board, effectively low or zero interest loans where the project pays for itself. There's also something called energy performance contracting, where a third party will take investment in assets and to make it reduce energy, and they get to calculate this so that they get the share of the difference between what you're paying for energy and what it costs them to run. So they take the risk. So what we're doing is looking through those options where it's not requiring council investment, other than obviously staff time to manage this. And as Helen pointed out in her statement, we're working with the Greater South East Net Zero Hub to use all their available tools and staff to look at everything from increasing solar to heat networks, analysis of buildings. So we're going to try and unashamedly leverage every single thing we can out of those available resources. So in general, most of what we're looking at is effectively sensible approaches to energy management and how we use our fleet. And then being in that place where, if anything does come along, that we know what projects will go in and whether they'll pay for themselves.
Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I want to, obviously a big slice of this is the leisure centres, and also you already indicated that doing a lifetime assessment here is crucial in your calculations. My concern is that just how much money are we putting in here to try and achieve a CO2 saving, and is that cost viable thing to be doing? And particularly when we look at Kingfisher, what I'd like to know is there's the solar PV panels on the roof of on the solar carports. Is there any figures available on that so that we can isolate that and, as part of the assessment of the costs?
Thanks for the question. Just to clarify on the last point around isolating the solar on the roof and the carport, is that in terms of what the benefit it brings or the engine carbon?
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry if I wasn't clear. It's the cost. How much money does that generate is what I'm asking, because I think it's mixed up within the whole structure of the Kingfisher pool, is it? But it would be useful to have an understanding about what that is, because I think perhaps also the talk was of bringing in more batteries, and what would the cost of that be? But looking down the line to see, well, is this something we should be doing?
So in terms of cost, I can bring those figures back. We have just the carbon in the report, but it's essentially generated from the same source, which is how much energy is consumed on site that otherwise we would have imported from an energy supplier. So we can provide those details after this if you'd like. And then we'll have another look as well at the opportunities for export. But with those sites, pretty much everything gets used on site because there's such high energy demand anyway. Batteries is a slightly different question because it's there partly to capture what you're generating if you are exporting, but also there's the potential for batteries to look at using off-peak tariffs, etc., to charge up, but we're not at that point yet. So I'll come back to you with those figures, so that's okay, on how much direct financial benefit just from those.
Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. You mentioned the climate champions in different departments of Babergh District Council. Are there any climate champions in the leisure centres at all? Thank you.
Not to my knowledge, but that's actually quite a good idea. Oop, there's some debate here.
Yeah, and in terms of climate change champions within the leisure centres, locally I don't think there are. Regionally, and so with, well, it wouldn't be here because it's everyone active is in Mid-Suffolk, but in Babergh I'm not sure that there are, but it's definitely something that we could approach them about. We have quarterly performance meetings where we have a lot of internal officers meet with Abercroft, so that's something that we could raise with them and see if we can't have them implement something similar within their centres.
Thank you.
Councillor Grandin.
Thank you. There's the fabulous carport solar scheme at Kingfisher. I just wondered if there's anything similar planned for Hadley Leisure Centre, please, and whether it would be cost efficient and so on to do so.
Thank you. So there aren't any current plans for a solar carport scheme at Hadley. The Sudbury Kingfisher scheme, and there's a similar scheme in Mid-Suffolk, were pilot projects. We are still working through some of the learnings from that pilot project. It was also funded by external sums. So I think we would remain open to it as a possibility, subject to the full outcome of the learning from those two pilots, and also subject to funding being available.
Councillor Wyman.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the previous report from the waste folks, we heard about, and I'll get to the question in a minute, we heard about the changes to our waste management, and I think Ollie talked about savings in CO2 in relation to the operation of the new sort of simple recycling process that we start in June. I meant to ask the question really, but I didn't get around to it really, which was Suffolk County Council will be having their biodigester to deal with the food waste. Presumably at some point in time there'll be a balancing point between scope 1 emissions relating to our vehicles, and probably for us anyway, not perhaps for Mid-Suffolk, but we'll have an increase in our HVO consumption. How are we balancing this off with the biodigester point in terms of, I'm not familiar whether it's a energy to, gas to electricity or gas to grid proposition, because if it's gas to grid, then it's good, because it becomes then it's not within scope, but if it's gas to electricity, then it'll be a scope 3 emission, because they'll be burning gas from the biodigester to create electricity on the site. So presumably that's part of our overall operation, so that would fall within scope 3. I'm just interested to know what, if any, sort of anticipation have we made for that. By the way, I'm quite happy to wait for the answer as well.
There's some parts that will probably have to come back on. I think in general, some of these emissions we picked up through our own reporting. Some of these emissions that you say will be through Suffolk County Council or in the area-based emissions. So, of course, in the short term, if we have an increase in fleet movements, we will have an increase in the HVO emissions. Hopefully there's a net saving overall from this work, but that net saving won't show in our accounts. But I think it's important to explain these things, rather like with where we are supplying electricity to public electric vehicle charging points. The more success we have that in with those charge points and people using electric vehicles, the more emissions we will have in the short term. But the net saving from avoiding petrol and diesel journeys is not factored into our account, but it will increase. So with the waste emissions, if we come back to you on that particular site and what the different parts are used for, in terms of where the food waste is going, because it is going to be quite a complex set of calculations, which is normally around, well, what's it saving compared to sort of the counterfactuals. So there's never a nice simple answer on those ones, but hopefully overall we are seeing a net saving.
Thanks, Jonathan. Potentially, the food waste not going to the incinerator and the CO2 that's given off by burning the food waste, if that goes to the biodigester and it goes gas to grid, then that's quite a significant CO2 saving, isn't it? You know, so it would be useful in a way to understand what the county council are proposing, really, in terms of what their plans are, really. Will it be gas to grid or will it be gas to electricity generation? Because that will make quite a difference.
Yep, that's an interesting one, and unfortunately I don't know enough about it to reply confidently, so we will come back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you. I have a question. Some of the savings in the report, like savings at Endeavour House, where we've reduced our footprint, yes, we've reduced the emissions, but the emissions are still going on because someone else has just taken our place up in the building. So they're sort of not, they're savings, but they're not saving the planet, because they're still happening. I mean, there may be other areas within the report as well that I don't know, that where we've cut our savings, but the emissions are still happening. Should we have a caveat in the report to say that, you know, these savings are for Babergh, but not the emissions may still be happening because they've just been passed on to someone else?
Good point. We can add that caveat in. You are correct. I mean, we are looking at what Babergh is doing. So if we do get rid of something, say for example, an asset of ours is sold, you know, that building may still be generating carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, but in terms of the planet, you are right. It's not a saving. It's only a saving from us.
And so just to add that we're trying to be quite explicit with the commentary this year to say exactly why we think that things have changed. So where it's just a simple change in the conversion factor from energy into carbon, what difference we expect that to have made just by itself. So we're not claiming progress where it's not down to us. So people can see what's a result of an action and what's a result of some other factor. I think it's important the public understand the reasons why.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Grandall, then Councillor... okay, Councillor Clover.
Right, thank you. Yeah, just looking at the EPCs and the DECs, and there's variances there, aren't there, with EPCs and DPCs. I'm struggling to see the relevance of DEC, simply because I'm not quite convinced that it's an accurate way of giving a good picture. Would you like to comment on that?
Happy to comment. Emily may want to come in afterwards, but so EPCs, they're assessing normally the ability for the building to run energy efficiently in terms of what it costs. There's also a secondary part which is around the environmental impact of the building, but it's essentially almost an approximation of what elements are in the building, what type of heating system, and in theory, how should this perform. The DEC, Display Energy Certificate, is a requirement for larger public buildings, and that tells you how it's actually performing. And so depending on the size, I think it's over 1,000 square metres is the threshold, you either have to update it every 10 years or every year. And so they tell you, it's a bit, the officer in our team said it's a bit like an MOT might tell you that your car is roadworthy, but it won't tell you how it's being operated, but how someone drives it. So it's effectively that's the difference between the two. I would say there's a caveat with both, that it very much depends on the quality of the data put in. And there's a history of, I mean, hopefully the EPCs we have are good data quality, but it is known that there are various issues with energy performance certificates. So they're not a substitute for more detailed surveys.
But it can, on DECs, it can be 10-year-old assessment data, is that correct?
Thank you. So I think the requirement for EPCs is to have an EPC undertaken every 10 years. So you can have an EPC that will have a rating that it was given when it was assessed, but a number of things can have changed over that period of time, so that rating might not reflect its current position. We do try to manage that where there are extensive works that have been undertaken, then it makes sense to reassess those EPCs so that you can get a more up-to-date picture. I think with a lot of these things, we don't necessarily have a perfect way of monitoring, but EPCs and DECs are kind of accepted across the market. And so it's a sort of best tool that we have to a certain degree. They're not perfect, but they're kind of what operators and building owners have accepted and adopted. They do keep adapting and changing as well. So if you have an EPC assessor go out now, their requirements in terms of getting an A will be higher than 10 years ago to get an A rating as well. So they are moving with the times, but they're a broad category, I suppose, for assessing what's happening with our buildings and how they're being operated.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Emily about the former Babergh offices in Hadley? I'd like to know what measures are being put in to conserve energy and so on there, but also how much that has added to, have we gone beyond what we need to do, and has that added a lot to the cost of the build? And if it has, will we get that money back in the sale value? So sort of string of three questions really that are all linked.
So I think we're probably straying outside the scope of
really
the meeting. But we have completed those developments. We're in the process of completing those developments in according with modern standards. So they're certainly more energy efficient now than they were 4 or 5 years ago when we first commenced the development.
Let's look at others.
Thank you. This might be going out of the scope of this as well, I'm not sure. A couple of years ago, as part of my being a councillor, I attended carbon literacy training. It wasn't mandatory for all councillors. I was rather surprised by that when I did the training. It's run by the Carbon Literacy Project, and I was wondering whether staff are offered this training, because it was really powerful. Thank you.
Alongside our climate change champions. There are plans also to, because obviously we've had new staff that have joined, so there are plans to extend that, and I'll be looking into that, doing that in the new year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions from members? Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the number of EV charge points supplied at the Kingfisher there. Do you know the occupancy rates of the car charging points? I mean, is it well used? And obviously, I accept that it's very difficult to get some understanding of this in terms of net benefit, but it would just be interesting to know what the occupancy rates are. Thank you.
Is it okay if we come back to you on the occupancy rates? So we need to look at individual numbers of charges and percentage a day, etc. Thanks.
Any further questions? One more. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of going back to the home working there, is it true to say that there's no net benefit in terms of CO2 emissions in working from home?
So there's two answers to this. One is the net benefit for Babergh as a council, and a net benefit in terms of sort of our area-based emissions. So on average, and so what we take into account with the working from home is there's a contribution of electricity in the home and a contribution of heating. It's probably quite a conservative estimate for a typical house, and you're actually having to heat the whole house to have a person home. And so if you like, the carbon intensity per employee is higher at home than it is in Endeavour House. But it doesn't include not travelling, and so the commute would probably outweigh that kind of benefit of being in Endeavour House in terms of net carbon saving. But for the council, at the moment, being in Endeavour House is a saving to the assumed working from home emissions. But again, it's an assumption about the typical housing situation people have. So it's there's a reasonable amount of uncertainty in it. But again, these are kind of nationally aligned figures that we use. So it's the best available approach we have.
Thank you. Can you say what the differential is between home working and office working?
Will just take me a moment to look up, so if that's okay, I'll...
Any other questions? We'll just wait for Jonathan to... Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move into debate then, while Jonathan looks that up. Okay, Councillor Wyman?
Thank you. I think we all accept it's a really challenging environment. Obviously, as Councillor Davis expressed when she opened the presentation, you know, to save on carbon, you have to invest. And, you know, the financial position for the council, it stands at the present time, is extremely challenging. So, and particularly when we look at you know, where our peak CO2 emissions are, which is in the leisure centres and the like. As an organisation, we're hard-pressed to maintain the leisure centres, let alone consider investing heavily into other carbon sort of saving processes. So, like, I think we're all really keen to do the best we possibly can. It really is almost beyond us at this present time in the current sort of environment with the cost of debt and all the various other things that we carry with us. So I think our colleagues are doing a fantastic job by trying to save and get whatever they can from the whole process. But it does feel as though you're trying to fight a battle with one arm tied behind your back, because we simply do not have and the governments aren't also offering grants and things like they were previously. So it's a really challenging environment. So I think they're doing a great job, and all we can do is just soldier on and look forward to local government reorganisation and a bit more capital, perhaps.
Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to endorse what Councillor Wyman said. I think the point about the leisure centres, they do deliver great community benefit, and I think we have to be very mindful of that. But then, of course, then we have obviously the responsibility to manage the financing and the funding of them as diligently as possible. So, yeah, it's a tough ask, I think. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anything you want to say? No? Any recommendations anyone wants to add? No? Okay, ask Alicia what we got then at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. So there is a set recommendation in the paperwork, which I'll read out for members. That is that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee notes and supports the significant decarbonisation progress that has been made by the Council since 2019 and the plan it has in place to meet the challenge of achieving net zero by 2030. That's the recommendation is in the report, Chair.
Can we add one about adding caveats when the emissions are saved for Babergh but not saved for, you know.
Yeah, I'm happy to write that as a recommendation, or the officers can take that away as a bit of feedback for future reports if you'd like. So that was a comment about adding caveats to future reports, making it a bit more clearer where carbon emissions have been saved for Babergh as an organisation, but they haven't been stopped for say Endeavour House as a whole, with moving the floor plate as an example.
Okay, if we're happy with that, can we have a proposer? Councillor Wyman and the seconder. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in ModGov. One second, I need to rerun that vote because I pressed start and then I pressed stop immediately, so let me rerun that vote. 1 second. It should now be in progress again for you. Sorry. Just weren't quick enough, that's all. Thank you, Chair. That makes 6 votes for that recommendation, so that's carried.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. And thanks to Councillor Davis and officers for coming in today to answer questions. Right, moving on. We are now got the forthcoming decisions list. Any comments on the forthcoming decisions list from anyone? No? Okay. And item 10 is the overview and scrutiny work plan. Any comments? Councillor Wyman.
I noticed on the work plan we've got the annual review into the implementation of new car parking charges down for February, 16th February. Is that perhaps... It says annual review. Is it a little too soon perhaps, or am I...
It's always planned for February, wasn't it?
You know, it says the annual review of implementation of new car parking charges for the 16th of February 2026 to conduct a review into the new parking charges implemented across Babergh in January 2025. My question is that not a little premature?
It was always planned for February, wasn't it? I mean, as far as I'm aware, we always planned it for
Yeah,
February.
so
I'm just questioning the date, that's all.
That's fine.
I'm just being slightly cantankerous, but it's just, sorry, I apologise.
Don't worry about it. So it's always been on the work plan to be reviewed in February, as agreed, because that would be a year since parking charges were implemented. So it would give us a year's worth of data to review as a committee, and that would obviously be the first possible point in which we could analyse that data. I'm open to comments as if we think it's too soon, but ultimately it's not up for me to
I'm
make
sure
that decision.
I'm sure I'll have a view and other people have a different view, but I mean that's just my question.
Councillor Grandin.
Yes, while that will be a year, will it be enough time for the team to do what they need to do and to get the report out to us and for us to then find out what the community thinks and so on. So I wonder if maybe, although I notice the next meeting's a joint meeting, because we'd like it as soon as possible actually. I'm just not sure if there's enough time to do all that needs to be done, is there? You would know.
So I've had quite intensive conversations with Mark Ems, the director that's responsible for that area. His team are aware that that report is coming. It's something that we've been working on behind the scenes for a little while, so they will have enough time to prep all the data that we need. It's not coming as a surprise to them. Whether that involves reference to community feel about the parking charges, I wouldn't know at this moment, but it's definitely something that we can discuss in terms of chairs briefings, where Councillor Holt and Councillor Jameson will have the ability to sort of scope that item with the director and his team, and we can maybe bring that about in the report if the committee thinks that that is something that needs to be included in there. But we would take your step.
Couldn't we? Prior to, make sure it's ready. Councillor Clover.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, I think the car parking charges came in on, was it the 13th of January, the second week of January 2023, was it? And therefore, and this is for was it the date for the car parking, was it? Oh yes, it's there, it's the 16th of February. So that would be a 4-week period in which to assemble and obviously get the report issued. So it should, I would like to think there would be enough time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, look at service improvements and any other things that we need to consider.
Yeah, well, we will liaise with Mark before. Councillor Grandin.
May I suggest that witnesses, people who have been affected by the charges, be invited to speak, if they so wish, during that meeting, please. So, for example, businesses, people whose parking near their homes has been affected, and so on and so forth.
Well, as far as I remember, the intention was always to speak to those people, whether we could get them as witnesses.
They could be, if maybe no one wishes to come, but if people wish to attend and speak, could that be made? Because we always, as a committee, in long past, used to have external witnesses for certain meetings where it was appropriate. And in those days, I always used to find that quite useful, having, the opinion of people where something affects them. And we had the lady last meeting who talked about housing and so on, which was very helpful, getting someone who who experiences it. But I think this might be an occasion where it might be appropriate again, please.
Thank you, Councillor. I certainly take your comments on board. Just thinking of it from a logistical point of view, that might be very tricky, because obviously the new car parking charges affects everyone in the district. So trying to get a very balanced representation of people at an overview and scrutiny meeting that will actually add value to the review that the committee are undertaking is going to be quite challenging. I'm not saying no, but it would be something that I couldn't agree to at this meeting how it is, but it is something that I could take away and have a discussion about. Obviously we'll try and, or led by the chair and vice chair, be steered as to how much public engagement goes into the paperwork, but whether that, whether we then hold space for that to happen at committee is a different thing, which would take a lot of planning. So as I say, not something I can agree to right here, right now. But I do just want to emphasise that on every overview and scrutiny agenda, there is the ability for the public to submit questions to the committee. So that's always open as a mechanism for members of the public to get involved in our scrutiny committee meetings, and they're always public. So while they may not be able to have input in the meeting, everyone's always welcome to attend and watch in person or online if we're in here. Thank you.
Councillor Grandin.
You used the word balance there, and I think it's possibly unlikely on that topic and many topics that you would get balance from the community, because there's probably a very tiny number of people that would say, oh yeah, we're really happy about it. But it would get a feeling of the impact.
I mean, I speak to Councillor Holt, but could we perhaps invite a member of the parish council to represent the views of the towns? As Alicia said, we could end up with hordes of people coming to witness it, so we wouldn't have space for Councillor Wyman.
Far be it from me to disagree with Councillor Grandin, but the balance, I suspect if I took 100 people in Cape Samir and asked them whether they were in favour of changing the car parking charges in Hadley, they would think quite positively about those sort of things, really. When I say positively, it's not really a major issue. I just think car parking charges aren't going to change. They're not going to go back to nothing. So I think we just need to sort of accept that. From a revenue perspective, for the authority, it's really important we balance our books. And if we continue to niggle away at these issues, we aren't going to make any progress at all, really. And I completely understand the emotive part of car parking charges. My wife regularly tells me off every time she goes to Hadley, but that's not the point. The point is that we need to be balanced and we need to be objective about how we deal with it. We need to scrutinise it properly, which means being exhaustive across the authority.
Okay. Well, let's not get into too much of a debate about it, but anything else on the work plan? Or the tracker? Any comments on the overview and scrutiny tracker? Councillor Wyman.
I know it's really early doors, but there's lots of not starters on the pre-planning application advice and revisit. Is that because there's pressure on resources? It was in September.
Thank you, Councillor. I've listed them on the action tracker as not started, as I haven't had an update from the Cabinet member as of yet. They've received recommendations all okay, and I sent them a reminder email a couple of weeks ago, and I think that the Cabinet member was going away to discuss with the officers, so I'm quite satisfied that they're being spoken about and discussed, but I just want to get a further update before I list them as ongoing, hence why they're in red at the moment.
So we can assume there are no rejections.
At the moment, I think it's fair to assume there's no rejections. Yeah.
Councillor Clover. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the same point, the back page, 160, there's two going back to the October and July 24 that still have got not started against them. Is there a... What, would you be aware of the reasons for that?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not too aware of the reasons at the moment. So again, these are recommendations that I have chased on with the appropriate departments. Again, I'm just waiting to hear responses back. Obviously, those recommendations have been out of date for a long while, so I'm not the happiest as well about them still sitting on the action tracker. Yeah. I know I was having a communication with the communities team about the community safety partnership one, so we might just need to explore a little bit of a further conversation around that, because I do think that there is work underway regarding that recommendation, but wasn't necessarily sure if it best addressed it. So that's a conversation to have outside of the meeting, I think, with the chair. So, thank you.
Councillor Grandin.
I just wonder, but I don't know how it can be done, whether there's training needed, or maybe that's not even the right word, for both officers and councillors on the role of ONS in a cabinet-led council.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to explore having further training. So we're doing a lot of work from a governance team perspective at the moment as to strengthening the relationship between the Scrutiny Committee and the Cabinet. In particular, as Cabinet are obviously a key stakeholder in the ONS processes. We can always widen that out to other councillors. It's a similar point to what I made about members of the public coming over viewing scrutiny committees. Any councillors can come and ask questions, and that's absolutely fine, and we'd always accommodate that if people want to come along if there's a topic that interests them. Maybe that's something I can take away from this meeting and discuss with my manager about how we elevate sort of where scrutiny is, improve its visibility, let's say, in the organisation.
Yeah, if I might add, please. Yes, because I remember when, as a council, we agreed to move to the cabinet model, and one of the very important aspects was that the cabinet would be scrutinised by this committee, and that it was, you know, and the very importance of it and that kind of thing, and that ONS would have a much stronger role to play in the cabinet system. So, you know, that's part of the background, really.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think that's a fair comment, and I do, as I say, I think we are doing a lot of work to strengthen that relationship between Cabinet and overview and scrutiny to get it where it needs to be. As you can see at today's meeting, all of the Cabinet members that are intending to come were here, which is really positive to see. So I'm really hoping that we are taking steps in the right direction, and even going back to today's topics where we have a policy in front of us that we're reviewing before it goes to Cabinet, doing that pre-scrutiny as well as post-decision scrutiny, is really valuable. So I think, from my personal perspective, we're making good improvements in the right direction to find a balance for what scrutiny is doing and also making sure that we have an impact on what the Cabinet is delivering. I think that's becoming a lot more apparent now. Just my opinion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if there's no more comments, next meeting is a Babergh overview and scrutiny on the 15th of December. And that concludes this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at 5:21.